Macy Gray made about trans women.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm paraphrasing here. She said, just because you change your parts does not make you a woman. And
Mm-hmm.
Macy Gray, of course, is a famous R&B singer known for songs like I Try, songs like Still, Do Something, and so on. And Macy Gray has since spoken out, and she spoke out, I believe, on the Today Show, or could be Good Morning America, forgive me. But she spoke out about the backlash she received for her comments. Those comments were also coupled with comments that Bette Midler made. Bette Midler,
Mm-hmm.
of course, the famous singer known for "Wind Beneath My Wings" and "From a Distance," and she made some comments about they are trying to erase us and so on, I guess, with trans identity. But I do want to play a bit of Macy Gray. And further context, she made those comments on Piers Morgan's show.
Mm.
Piers Morgan, who doesn't have the greatest record with Black communities, who has been famously attacking Simone Biles,
Yep.
Meghan Markle. I don't know if Macy Gray was
VP.
aware of that. Yeah, VP
Mm-hmm.
Kamala Harris. Piers Morgan, I don't know if she was aware of his record. But I want to play a piece of her interview with Hoda Kotb, breaking down her comments and not really apologizing, but saying that she learned. Listen to this. So I want to start here, Reese. I
Mm-hmm.
want to say that Macy Gray is not the enemy.
Right.
And you didn't say she was the enemy.
Nope.
Erica Savage didn't say she was the enemy. Macy Gray made some comments. People reacted. That's
Mm-hmm.
what happens. Now, as far as if people were giving her death threats and attacking her on social media, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
That's vile. That's uncalled for. Macy Gray is not the enemy, and
Mm-hmm.
she said something. And listen, Macy Gray's been on this show before, and Macy Gray is somebody, from what I know of her career, that does believe in individuality.
Mm-hmm.
I can recall when Macy Gray first came out, there were people questioning her womanhood. There
Yeah.
were people saying she didn't look enough like a woman. She didn't sound enough like a woman. Macy Gray definitely is rooted in being an individual. And so I think what people don't always realize is that when you and I are talking about something on radio, when anybody is, we're not saying that nobody can make a mistake. And we're
Mm-hmm.
not saying you can't have a different opinion. No one's saying that at all. So she has apologized and or made her comment. I didn't. She didn't say the words "I'm sorry,"
Yeah.
but that's where she is. And Macy Gray is not the enemy. Macy
Mm-hmm.
Gray is not Clarence Thomas.
Right.
Macy Gray is not Ted Cruz. Macy Gray is not that person in Georgia whose name I don't say, the Jewish space lasers person. Macy Gray is, last name Green. I don't like to say her name.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Macy Gray is not Brett Kavanaugh. That's not who she is. She doesn't have
Yeah.
power in that way. She made a comment that I didn't agree with, but she is not the enemy. And on the flip side of that, I want to add to some people who called in yesterday with Reese, with yourself and Erica Savage. I want y'all to know that trans people are not the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And a trans woman identifying as a trans woman doesn't take anything away from other women. And what I've been seeing, I've been hearing this narrative, Reese, of people saying that trans people are trying to erase women. I've been seeing this out there, and I've heard people say this. And some of y'all who have said it, if you're listening, I am talking about you. But I never hear this narrative about trans men.
Yeah.
I never hear this narrative that trans men are trying to erase men, whatever. So for this show, I reached out to a friend of mine who's trans, and she's not super well known, but she does some great activist work. And I said, listen, me and Reese Colbert are going to talk about this. I'd love for you to come on air to have a trans voice in this conversation. And she said, Clay, I love you, but no.
Mm.
I don't want to come on your airwaves and defend and explain my right to exist.
Mm.
I heard the show yesterday. Reese and Erica were 1,000% on point. And I don't want to be in there as the trans person having to defend myself.
Yeah.
And she said, just like, and this is a Black trans person, she said, just like you don't want to have to always defend yourself to white people, I don't want to have to always defend myself to Black people who are in my community who have an issue with how I mind my business.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of me saying, I won't go on Fox News anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of me saying, I am no longer going to give one-on-one lessons for white people who are grappling with their own racism.
Mm-hmm.
And Reese, it saddened me that she, as a Black person,
Mm-hmm.
did not feel comfortable coming on a Black space.
Yeah.
It really saddened me. And she is not Herschel Walker.
Mm-hmm.
She is not someone who's upholding white supremacy. She fights for Black people every day
Mm-hmm.
at a nonprofit organization. Again, I'm not going to say her name, every single day. And she didn't feel comfortable coming on these airwaves to talk with other Black folks because of what she heard yesterday. And she said it hurt her.
Yeah.
It hurt her. And
Mm.
again, not an attack on Macy Gray whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me, I love Macy. I'll still rock Macy. You know, she's the one that said Macy isn't the enemy. So I'm stealing her language, you know,
Yeah.
forgive me. But and she said that I could say that. But that really saddened me.
Mm-hmm.
And it let me know the work that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what else you and Erica could have said, but I wanted to really make that clear that I spoke to somebody, y'all, and y'all love these airwaves, and y'all love Urban View and Laree Favors and Joe Madison and Karen Hunter and Heather B and Reese Colbert as a contributor. Y'all love this fam. And there is a person in our fam who didn't feel comfortable or safe to talk to us.
Mm.
Where are we? Why do we have more heat for trans people than we do for Cotton to Congress Tim Scott? Why? Why? I want to understand that. And we have to get out of this lens of, well, it's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't understand it, I get it. I couldn't do a full show on the history of communist China. That's not my lane.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do a full show on the nuances, every single minutia of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
Just not my lane. I couldn't do it. And how horrible is it that people can be so indignant and, as you say, Reese, stand in it with something you don't know? The majority of you don't know any trans people.
Yeah.
The majority of you haven't even had a conversation with the trans person. And trans people are not trying to erase women.
Mm-mm.
Trans people have no threat to quote unquote cisgender women. And we could bring up the one example of a sports player on a swim team. And the conservative right has exploited that story through and through, and then we fall for it. Just like the conservative right will exploit one story at a private school in Connecticut where there were no Black people, and one teacher said white people are the oppressors. And they managed to exploit that story and create all these critical race theory laws. It just saddens me, Reese, that we fall for the gaslighting. A trans person, and you had another caller that called in yesterday, Reese, who said, well, I identify as transsexual. I don't use the word transgender. And she said Janet Mock started the whole pronoun thing. I'm like, and for those who don't know, Janet Mock is a great activist, a director, was a director on Pose. I'm like, why is Janet Mock in it? Like, why is she? Janet just minds her business, right? But and then so what happened, and with all respect to the older trans woman who called in and said that, then she said all they care about, the reason why they're saying transgender or not transsexual is because they don't want you to think about what they have between their legs. And I know she was a trans person saying this, but even she can be wrong.
Yeah.
Trans people don't want you to think about their genitals.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want you to think about it. We're the ones thinking about it. Pre-op, post-op, what do you do with it? Who's having this? Who's doing this? What if they're attracted to you? If you're attracted to a trans person, or you're straight or you're gay, straight people in power are the ones who are making it an issue over somebody's gender identity.
Yeah.
And all I ask is that we don't throw other Black people away. And it's okay to be confused. I know gay men who don't understand trans people, who have said comments like that. Gay men who have said that. But I ask that it's okay to make mistakes and have questions, but the vitriol that some people called in, Reese, was so disappointing. Then you're on Instagram explaining it some more on your IG page, defending the right for people just to live their lives. It hurt me, y'all. And I ask us to not hurt each other and to not hurt people who are in our community who are fighting for us. And lastly, I'll say this that I want you to sound off, Reese. Lastly, you don't know who's trans sometimes. You may think you know. That coworker next to you, when you're saying trans this, they could be trans. You really don't know. You don't know somebody's business. I've been on jobs where people are saying faggot this, faggot that. This is when I was very young. They had no idea they were sitting next to two gay people at the lunch table on the job. You don't know who is who. You may think you know everybody's business. You may think you could tell and map everybody out, but you don't know. And we as Black people, let's not throw each other away unless you are upholding white supremacy. Full stop. Full stop. Trans people have no threat to the existence of any cisgender person. And we have to really think, and I think it goes to misogyny, why people are reportedly think that trans women are erasing women, but you never hear about trans men erasing men.
Yeah.
What's the deep misogyny angle there? So I just wanted to say that, Reese, and I wanted to thank you for yesterday's show. But I did want to share that we had a person who is in our community who didn't want to come on because she didn't want to have to defend her right to exist.
Yeah. That is it. You know, it is disappointing because the way that Erica and I approached the conversation, we started off, you know, saying this is not a canceled conversation. And if you go back and listen to what Macy said, she said a couple of keywords. I learned. That's what this space is about. You know, and it's funny, people are open to learning about a lot of the takes that we give on politics, on world events, on cultural events. But when it comes to the LGBTQ community, it's like ears are closed and everything that we say goes in one ear and out the others because people are entering the conversation wanting to reinforce their own, my opinion. But you know what? We have to learn to be corrected. We have to learn to be enlightened. And it's not an indictment on you if you had an opinion that was rooted in misunderstanding. And now you're getting information. Or maybe you have an opinion and you didn't realize that, well, by me, behaving in a certain way that's harmful to other people. That was the whole purpose of our discussion yesterday, was to say that this can be hurtful to people. Macy Gray admitted people told her it was hurtful. Clay just told us about how somebody who was listening felt that it was hurtful. And that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to hurt each other. We're here to learn from each other and we're here to grow together. And it does not diminish us to recognize the humanity of everybody around us. And that's where it starts as a human being. And then part of that is recognizing the fullness of that human being. And part of that is their gender. And one of the things, I wish I would have said this yesterday on the air, is that, you know, because I was arguing with people all night, because of course people are like, well, she didn't say nothing wrong. Okay, fine, whatever. But what people kept saying is, technically, you're not a woman, they're not a woman, they're not a woman. And I said, okay, well, here's where you guys are wrong. There's a distinction between gender and sex. And a lot of people do not know this. So this is from the World Health Organization. So I just want to level set. And this might blow some of y'all mind. And a lot of people still, even after they heard it, they still didn't want to correct themselves. But the World Health Organization says gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. Socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other as a social construct. Gender varies from society to society and can change over time. Here's the rub. Still from the World Health Organization. Gender interacts with, but is different from sex, which refers to the different biological and physiological characteristics of females, males, and intersex persons, such as chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive organs. Gender and sex are related, but different from gender identity. Gender identity refers to a person's deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond to the person's physiology or designated sex at birth. So if you are saying technically somebody is not a woman because of their chromosomes, their reproductive organs, you are wrong. Okay, definitions are a thing. Okay, now people use female and woman as a synonym, but just because they're synonyms doesn't mean that they're interchangeable. So I just want to at least start, we should all be able to accept the basic sets of facts, which is that a gender is not necessarily how you're born. Now, you are a woman if you're born female and you identify as a woman. But that not everybody who's born female identifies as a woman. Some of them identify as men, or they might be non-binary. There's all kinds of spectrums, and we just have to open our minds to different experiences. And being inclusive is not reductive to anybody. It's not being neutral. Somebody said you're for gender neutral language. No, you have a wide variety of terms. Some of those terms are gender neutral, not all of them. You don't have to use that term in that particular circumstance. That term is used for a specific reason in a specific circumstance. That doesn't negate all the other terms that are out there. You have not seen Webster's Dictionary cross out the word woman or cross out the word man. Like, come on. So I just want us to just do better. When you know better, then maybe you can do better. Instead of rejecting facts, instead of rejecting new information, take it in. Just take it in just a little bit. That's all we asking. And then the one other thing I want to say to your friend's point, I think we all have work to do. It's not just on the trans community to plead their humanity and their existence to the rest of us. We're not in any position to say, well, I don't care what you call yourself. You can call yourself whatever you want. I'm not going to acknowledge it. Well, that makes you a fucking asshole. Okay? That makes you ignorant, and that makes you a fucking asshole. Because who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to deny somebody else's existence and their experience? You're ignorant. I'm sorry. Do better. We need to challenge each other on this. And I had somebody comment to me, and it's funny because I mentioned this yesterday on the show, how somebody's called me trans before as an insult. And so somebody on my page who follows me said, well, maybe she's trans the way she's defending them. And I said, okay, first of all, I'd like to clarify with people. So I said, who's the she you're referring to? Because there was other people talking. And she was like, well, she gave the definition. That means you. I said, okay, well, I always clarify before I get disrespectful. So now that I'm clear, let me go on ahead and cut your ass out, but it's just like, I said, number one, it's not an insult to call me trans because I'm not trans. And being trans is not anything to be insulted by. It's not anything to be offended by. There's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that you're using it as a slur to me shows that you're fucking ignorant, and you have a pea-sized brain to think that only a trans person can defend a trans person. So I understand this is a heavy lift for people, because so much of our worth is in our self-esteem, is in, for a lot of people, not everybody, is in having a leg up on somebody else. Is we have these different hierarchies that we place ourselves in. Sometimes it's on how much money you make, sometimes it's how you look, sometimes it's whatever, And gender happens to be one of those things. And, you know, women technically are kind of at the bottom of the totem pole. Like if you look at every statistic, we get the raw
Absolutely.
end of the deal. And then if you're a Black
Absolutely.
woman, and that much more, you know.
Definitely.
So this seems to me to be the one place where people want to kind of plant their flag and be like, nah, you ain't gonna be equal to me. You're not gonna be on par. I mean, you can't equate your experience with me. Well, nobody's equating anything because we all have our individual experiences, and we're not the yardstick for whether somebody else's experience is valid. And I will end on this, like the World Health Organization says, gender identity refers to a person's deeply felt internal and individual experience. So it doesn't matter if they grew up like how you grew up, or somebody said they ain't experienced with me, my auntie, my cousin, it don't matter. It's about their individual experience, and it costs you nothing to honor that. Nothing. And if it does cost you something, go work that out with Ayanla, go work that out with Jesus, go work that out with your therapist, go work that out with whoever you need to work it out with, because that's a you thing, not a trans thing.
You know, I want to also add, as far as the World Health Organization, you know, I'm a student of history, I'm degreed in Black Studies, is that if you look at indigenous cultures, they had third genders. Not every culture had man, woman. And I'm not saying we don't have man, woman. I identify as man, I identify as he. I've never had a gender identity question, but I'm just saying in indigenous cultures, in Native American culture, in some West African cultures, they had third genders. They had shamans who what we would now call trans, what we would now call some of these things. They had gender bending is nothing new. Non-binary is nothing new. It's kind of like when I hear some white people say, oh my gosh, we're talking about race all the time. We're talking about race all the time. Well, if you're white, you may not know we've been talking about race. If you're white, you may not know we've been on that stoop acknowledging race and racism and systemic racism. So I hear a lot of other people say, oh, we're talking about trans people all the time. Trans folks, if you've been trans, you've been living your life all the time. It's been your reality forever and ever and ever. So these aren't new conversations, but for you, some of you folks out there, it's new to you. And so you feel like you have to have an opinion on it. And you feel like you have you got it figured out. And I can't say this enough. I have heard people on airwaves talk about trans people erasing us. I've heard women say this. They are not trying to erase you. You read the opinion from the Supreme Court on Roe v. Wade. That's erasure. That's erasure. You should be worried about that. You see what's coming down the pipe, coming down with women. You had a 10-year-old girl who was raped in South Dakota, 10 years old, and she's pregnant, and she cannot terminate that pregnancy. A 10-year-old child is going to be forced to have a child because of laws that are in place in South Dakota. And y'all are worried about trans people, and you have the governor of South Dakota on CNN saying more or less that 10-year-old should have that child. What is that going to do to that child's body, having a child? They say, well, what about the fetus? What about the fetus? What about this child having a child? The trauma she's going to go through with that. And she can't terminate that pregnancy. What about that child's life at 10 years old? But y'all are worried about trans people should not even be on the list.
Yeah.
Should not even be. Do y'all see what they're trying to do to women? They want what they have in other countries. They want religious law. They're looking for canon law. Y'all are afraid of Sharia law. You should be afraid of what's coming down with Christian law in this country.
And,
see what's
can
happening
I
in
also
Florida.
just add to, because, you know, there's people who have been up in arms about the term birthing persons. Do you think that the term birthing persons, which recognizes a spectrum of people who give birth, is more harmful than a 10-year-old being forced to carry a baby to term after she's been raped? Like, that's what I'm saying. The priorities is fucked up.
Right.
Being inclusive language is not the problem. That's not erasure. It's actually inclusion. The fact that little girls around the country are going to be in this situation, and we know Black people, there's a lot of abuse in our community. Okay, come on, we got bigger fish to fry. That's all I'm saying.
So yeah, I just wanted to address that. And my friend, if you're listening, I understand why you didn't want to come on, but I want y'all to know there are Black trans people who are fighting for us, and they ain't trying to erase nobody. They really are not trying to erase anybody. In nowhere shape. They have no power to erase you. They're not trying to do that. Give me one trans person in the Senate. Give me one. Give me one trans person on the Supreme Court. Give me one trans person who's been a governor. Give me one trans person. Do we have a trans person in the House? I don't believe we do.
No.
And I believe there was the first trans person hired under Obama's administration. Just one. There's no threat. There's no threat, y'all. And what you can do, and I know Reese appreciates this as well, you can call in and say, okay, I have a question. I may not know. And we could chop it up like that. But when you call in, well, they're this, they're doing that, then you're just going down ignorant lane. It's okay to say, I don't really know. I'm a little bit, because there isn't a lot of exposure. Most of us live in our bubbles. Most of us live in our bubbles. But I beg of you, don't throw away people in our community. We don't have the time, the space, the numbers to throw people away in our community, especially if they are fighting for us.
And they're fighting for their own lives too. Come on.
Right.
They just trying to survive like we're trying to survive.
I know trans people who would tell me, well, the only jobs that I want to get are jobs that I can work at night because I'm afraid to walk outside during the day. And as a Black man from Philadelphia who has been terrified of police, a part of me could understand that fear. But I couldn't imagine being terrified to walk down the street at 9 a.m. going to work. And there was a fear there as a Black man, but a totally different fear that other Black folks might attack me because I live in a Black neighborhood and I might get attacked in Center City, Philadelphia, every step worried. Yeah. That there isn't even safety on my block. That's sad. We had a call on who identified as trans. I don't know. I guess she had to go off, but she, and I forgot the name. I'm so sorry. But she wanted to say thank you to Reese and Erica for the conversation last night. She didn't feel comfortable, yesterday rather. She didn't feel comfortable calling in, but she wanted to say thank you. I wish we could have got you on, but we missed you. So y'all did a great job yesterday.
Thank you.
Y'all did a great job. And if y'all felt like women were being erased, Black women were being erased, you and Erica would not be here for it. Like y'all would, if y'all really thought that.
I'm still, like I said, I'm the baddest bitch. I'm still popping. Who erasing me? How? When, where, and how? It's never going to happen. If you're a woman, stand in being a woman. Don't be pressed about the next bitch, what she got going on. I don't care what you got in between your legs. I don't care how big your tits are. I don't care how fabulous your lace front is. It's taking nothing from me. So I cannot relate. I cannot relate. On an intellectual level, I can't relate, but just on a bad bitch level, I can't relate to being erased. Right. That's just not in my DNA at all. I don't get it.
Right. You're not even thinking about it in that way. Not even at all.
Not
even thinking about it.